Hello, beautiful. I'm your host, Nicole Goff. Welcome to the Ecstatic Life Podcast, the podcast for women who want it all: health, wealth, freedom, authenticity, love, beauty, all of the hidden gems just waiting to be uncovered. This is the podcast for women who are ready to discover their inner creatrix, to discover their inner manifester, and who want to find the ecstatic in every day. Hello, and welcome back to the Ecstatic Life Podcast. I am host Nicole Goff, and today I am here with Danielle Jones, who is a wife, a mother, a coach, an author, a tutor, and an evaluator. And we're here to talk about her book, Surrender. The third edition will be coming out before the end of this year, and also to talk about healthy relationship dynamics and all things marriage and relationship. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. I'm happy the universe brought us together in the way that it did. It was serendipitous, and I love it when things just come together like that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite words.
Yes. Yeah, me too. That's really how I find all my podcast guests, is just following the little breadcrumbs that lead me to these amazing conversations. And so far it's worked, because all of the interviews I've done, I have enjoyed thoroughly. So I think it's a good method.
Yeah, it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah. So give us a quick background. That was a very quick intro. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of background, but I'll try to be brief so I'm not overwhelming anybody. But basically, I've been married to my husband for next month will be 17 years. And it's been a long, amazing journey. We definitely had a really rough start, and that's kind of what the book shares a lot about. A lot of time has passed since then, and I kind of just got the feeling that I should write a third edition to kind of make some adjustments and have a little bit more perspective of my nowadays feel. But yeah, we have 3 kids. We've lived in the Live Oak area for 6 years now, and we really love it here. The community is really great. We homeschool. We've always homeschooled. My oldest is 15 and a half, and that's an amazing journey in it of itself, and probably one of the best choices that I've ever made for my own individual family. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell, and there'll be quite a bit more to share, so I'll leave it at that.
And yeah, so the homeschool world is what brought us together, which is awesome. My eldest is almost 19. I graduated her from homeschool, and then my littlest is 2. So my homeschool journey still has a long way to go.
Yes. Redoing it all over again, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Me and my husband have been together for 13 years now, married for almost 10. Yeah. So we have been through our journey as well. I have not written a book about it, but I do talk about it a lot on social media. And, while the trials that we went through were not the same trials, I think we ended up coming to similar conclusions and having similar outcomes. And so I'm really excited to talk about this subject, because I have not talked about it on the podcast yet. And I think it's so important, because we're in a culture right now that so easily throws away marriage, and not only devalues and throws away marriage, but devalues it to the point where a lot of people just aren't even choosing it anymore.
Yeah.
And we know the statistics, it's 60% divorce rate. And then each time you're remarried, second marriages, it's 70%. And then it goes up to 80%. So the more times you're remarried, it doesn't get better. The grass is not greener. And I am divorced. My 18-year-old's father and I divorced when she was a baby. He had substance abuse problems, and ultimately I do think that one was probably for the best. I don't think it was something he couldn't overcome, and I don't think I could have gone that path. So ultimately,
that's a whole other layer of life that really there's no control there anymore for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. I still wonder, like he was in prison for the first 3 years of our daughter's life, and I'm like, if I had stuck it out and waited, but I don't think so. I mean, we're still friends now. We co-parented her whole life, and he's still the same. He's still the same dude. So, uh, but with my current husband now, yeah, we went through some trials, that's for sure, and it's been a journey. But I think it's as we were saying before we hit record, if you don't work it out in the relationship you're in now, it's just going to carry into the next one.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of internal things that need to be worked out within yourself before, because I'm not someone who tries to push any agenda on anybody. I realize that people have different goals, different desires, and different wants. But mainly, what I had in mind when I was sharing the story was for the ones who wanted to fight and for everyone who was telling them that they shouldn't or that they couldn't. It's for those people that there it is possible. There are plenty of testimonies to share that it is. And I just wanted to like reinforce that with, a relationship of evidence that shows that over a period of time.
Yeah, because you went through an experience of, and I'll say it here because you talk about it very openly in the book. You had your husband had an affair, so you had cheating in your marriage, and that is one of those things that a lot of people just can't accept. And to be, very open with my situation, we had some domestic violence. I mean, some got to that point with us, and in both your situation and mine, family members were saying, no, you got to get out of there, you got to leave, you can't stay. And so yeah, most people are not understanding when there are certain lines that get crossed, and I think the general idea is, well, you just don't come back from that.
Right. Absolutely. Definitely people push that narrative the majority of the time, especially nowadays. And I get it because way back in the day, it felt like there was never a choice or never a way out in the extreme circumstances. So I get where that narrative comes from, but it doesn't have to be that way. Life is very, very different now, and people can make conscious choices, and women have the ability to be more independent. So I just think it's an old narrative with a lot of layers. So again, I get where it's coming from, but I just want people to feel like there's hope, when they're in a dark tunnel, and that there is a light at the end. And that is definitely something that I wanted to leave as a message.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's why it comes through in the book when I read it too. And even in the worst case scenario, when someone does betray on some level that is, barely forgivable, like there still is redemption, and I think that that's really important. And also another narrative that we don't hear a lot.
Mhm.
There's the culture again, and not just in relationships, but just with people in general. It's the good bad dichotomy, and not understanding that people have an arc and people have a journey that they're on. And we all have our low points. And yeah, that forgiveness is just so huge.
It is. And it's really more of a gift to yourself than anybody else, because people don't walk around every day like, oh, they didn't forgive me. They didn't forgive me. But it's in you all the time when you don't forgive someone. You carry it around with you everywhere you go. And it might not be in the forefront of your mind, but it affects your actions. It affects your energy, you know, big time. And that affects your everyday life and everything that you do. One thing that in hindsight, it would have been too big for me to grasp in the moment, but looking back, it's super clear. Figuring out where your boundaries are is absolutely huge, because, and even creating them, because some people just don't have boundaries. They don't even have the concept of it. It's really hard to grasp unless you study and like work within yourself to try to figure that out. But I definitely figured out what boundaries really were through that whole process. And I met my boundary. And toward the end of the book, I share about the moment when my husband was talking about, graduating onto a new relationship and potentially introducing that person to my children. And I knew right in that moment that that was my boundary. And it wasn't that I couldn't continue loving him, because I would have continued loving him no matter what. I just knew that I was no longer willing to invest the one-sided energy that I was beyond that. And it was almost like once I figured out that boundary and I told him that so clearly and respectfully, that that was the moment the universe, or whatever you would like to call it, really shifted something inside of him. And he was like, wait a second, like, this is not what I want. He kind of, I imagine, got a visual in his head about what was about the path we were going to start taking. And it was like, once I discovered that boundary for myself, things started just falling into place after that. It wasn't instant and it wasn't necessarily immediately visible to me at the time. But in hindsight, you can absolutely see how it worked out that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's something I talk about a lot. I just did a social media post before we got on here about that, boundaries. And it's such a confusing thing for so many people because a lot of us as women, we see boundaries as almost like a negative, aggressive thing, right? Like
Right.
boundaries mean like being aggressive. And that is not really the essence of boundaries. The essence of boundaries is really begins in knowing yourself,
Yes,
and being
absolutely.
able to hear yourself. And so I think I want to step back, kind of like start at the beginning. So for people who are like, uh-oh, that's a baby waking up. I wanted to go back to the beginning, back to the start, the awakening, I would say, of these concepts. Because I think for a lot of people listening, they might not be there yet, They might have
Absolutely.
not have had those awakenings. Whew, I'm out of breath because I just ran a toddler downstairs to his sister and then ran back.
Yes, that's mama
I sound,
muscle right there. You
yeah,
go,
I
girl.
sound out of breath. So, what I read in your book was that it seemed to start with, as it does with most women, we get married and we start a family and we start losing ourselves. And so I feel like a lot of it starts with that loss of self. And I know
Yeah.
you'd said in your book you gained some weight, you stopped doing the things that you loved in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
then once you have a baby, there's more that falls away. As you become a wife, you become a mother, and suddenly that's your whole identity. And so it starts really with that loss of self. And after the loss of self, a lot of times the loss of connection in the
Yeah.
partnership. So, do you mind touching on that some and guess the beginning?
Absolutely. I love the breakdown of how you just shared that. So I, which I believe I mentioned in the book, I was very, very young, but both my husband and I came from broken families. So I think we both were so yearning so bad to create a family that was new and that could make us feel like we really were a part of like a whole family. And my husband and I talk about that a lot, which by the way, as we're stepping deeper into this conversation, I just want to mention that he's a rock star. And the fact that I consistently talk about this with people and literally wrote a book about it that shares obviously a lot of dark sides that he was involved in, like, I can't praise him enough for going through this and being open. And I just don't think there's a lot of people who would be able to handle that. So I really have to give him his credit in that area. Um, but beyond that, I was very, very young. I didn't have a lot of time to develop, life's important ideas and think about those things in a more objective perspective. And neither did my husband. We had a lot of growing up to do, and we both agreed that we wanted to have a child early on. And so we did. We had our first child a year and a half after we were married. And it was rocky all the way through that. Marriage in itself, trying to balance another individual is just enough on its own. And when you throw being young and started a family young in there, it's a lot. It's a lot. You're rocking on the boat all over the place. So it's understandable, why we went through a lot of the things that we went through, that differs per household. But between the insecurity of gaining weight and my body completely changing after having a baby, which, that's some more than others for some women. Mine changed drastically. And that was a difficult adjustment, which a little more hindsight. My parents are both very beautiful people. and some sense of superficiality got a little bit of, implanted in me. So that was really hard for me to deal with, and just not wanting to expose myself in any way. And that put a lot of, hardship on our relationship. Again, I have a severe mama bear mode. So when I became a mama, I jumped in head first, full dive, and just, I loved it. Nothing felt more natural to me. And just putting all that love and energy into our firstborn son created even more lack for my husband. And I imagine he was just reaching anywhere to just try to feel something real, something, with more connection. So there was a lot going on there. I could probably honestly go on and on in that area of what was lacking on his side, for him in the relationship. And I share that a lot in the book too.
I think
Um,
that's really important too, because it's so easy to demonize the other side. And especially, like I said, with me and my husband, we had a couple incidences of violence, and this is not something I've ever talked about publicly. So here it is. But, I realized my part in that, and it took, some really good coaching and some reflection from other people. But I realized that my trauma, my sexual trauma, was causing me to push him to be the monster that I expected all men to be.
oh,
And
wow.
oof, that
What a
was,
revelation that is.
yeah, that was a hard one. That my victimhood story was so strong that I actually became the perpetrator in a lot of ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
That that's a full circle right there for sure.
Yes, it was. And so coming to that conclusion and then, stepping into that and taking accountability was that was a journey. That was a huge journey. And like I said, there are a lot of people that I lost friends because some people are like, oh, well, when you cross that line, you never go back. And one of my best friends, she decided to part ways from our friendship because she didn't agree with my decision to, heal things. But it is super important, I feel like, to say that these things don't happen in isolation.
Right.
And so your husband didn't cheat in isolation. And it's not to blame the other person. It's not to, quote unquote, victim blame, as a lot of people like to say, oh, you're victim blaming. No, it's not to victim blame. It's to take accountability for your side of this situation, because there are always two stories. And it's just so easy to blame the party that does the more outward,
Right.
outward
The one that's
thing.
more obvious.
Yes.
Absolutely. But yeah, so like going a little ways down the road, he had multiple affairs, some that were more significant than others. And there were family influences that I kind of grasped onto where initially, when I found out, and I didn't find out from him, I found out from the person that he was having an affair with initially. And that was hard to swallow. I won't even go into that, but there was a lot, just just everything feels like it drops to the floor inside of you. And, I got it's really, really important to seek advice in those moments from an objective perspective, which is what is so amazing about coaching. That's what coaching is all about. But at the time, I, out people that did not have that objective perspective. And there was a lot of, oh, you don't deserve that. You're amazing. Da da da. He's a dirtbag, going on and saying all those things. So I waited a month of time to try to like digest it. But eventually, after hearing that, after that amount of time, I decided that separation was needed. I thought that that may help. I wasn't sure what that turnout would be, but we were in separate households for 3 months at that period of time. And it just went even further into chaos. So it did not have any positive effect at all, creating that separation. Not to say that couldn't have a positive effect for some people, but it absolutely was not in our case. And so we kind of superficially, reunited, after those 3 months. And we tried really, really hard to get back on the right track. But I think I felt things were more on the right track. And I just wasn't used to feeling his full heart anymore. That like
Mm,
I was kind of fooled as if, you know, we were back there. And I wasn't quite sure what marriage was supposed to feel like or look like. outside of that own like short-term experience that I had. So there was, a brief period of time from then, and we moved to Tennessee where we chose to have another child. And it was during that period of time where really just everything started to blow up on a bigger level, where he was seeing somebody else and he decided to leave out of state. And that is really when I started digging into my spiritual exploration, because I felt like I had nothing left. I was in Tennessee by myself with my 1-year-old son at the time, and I was pregnant with our second child, which again, I had this like superficial feeling like, oh, everything's great. We're having a baby. And then just all of a sudden, boom, it gets dropped like that. And he, even despite all of that was going on, still managed to look me in the face and said, listen, I don't know why I'm having to take this route. He's like, I love you and I respect you more than any human on this earth, but I just have to do this. He said, I can't stay, which I'm actually glad that this kind of presented itself this way. Pretty incredible hindsight factor that I didn't realize at the time. We had gotten pretty, invested into like, our spirituality and praying years and years before. And someone had actually prophesied, which people may buy into that, they may not, but they told my husband that we were going to go through a season of cheating, that he was going to do that. Someone completely separate. I didn't even know. He never told me that. That same night, someone told me that I was going to write a book about challenges that my husband and I were going. This was completely separate people prophesying the same exact night. And we didn't even find out till years later.
Oh, I just got
the same
goosebumps.
night that happened. So this was absolutely, I believe, a meant to be course that we were supposed to experience from and learn. And even though it looks really ugly and is not, fun to tell sometimes for people to hear, it does have a beautiful ending, and it's only continuing to grow. We're only continuing to overcome challenges and struggles. It doesn't end. Thankfully, the extremity of it, we've graduated beyond that. But there's so much, like, there's such a deeper level to things that you go through in life. And somehow, even if you can't see it in the moment, it does have a reason. There are underlying factors. And if you choose to learn every day, I don't think that you can go wrong.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote in the book. You said, marriage will be one of the hardest jobs you will ever have. And so when I read that, like what came up for me is something that I say on a regular basis, which is that marriage is a sacred mirror. And so
Yes.
I do believe we are given these partners, and a lot of it is based on our childhood, especially traumas that we go through, but also, soul contracts that we have, and things that probably don't even come from this life, but come from the spiritual realm. And we seek out these people to complement these patterns that we can only work out in relationship. And so
Absolutely.
these partners and these challenges are given to us. They're God's gift to us for our spiritual growth, in my opinion. And if you allow it to be, if you can see it for the sacred mirror that that person is, even when it's like the ugliest thing that you don't want to look at.
Yeah.
Like I said, with my situation, like it was very painful to look into that mirror and to see where I had been the bad guy in a lot of ways, you know?
Yes.
But that's where the magic is. That's where, like, in that pain, there is so much opportunity for so much growth. And so I, exactly as you said, I believe the same thing, that my husband was put in my path. And there were so many synchronicities in the way that we met and came together, and just we would talk about it all the time for years until we really got into like the shit,
Yes.
and then it was like, why are we together? But for years we would talk about like all the synchronicities that brought us together. And, I do believe people are placed in our lives for those reasons. So,
Yes, I absolutely agree. But yeah, so further on down the road, it comes to more like pivotal moments. And through this entire time, um, mainly when I was pregnant with our second child and while I was in Tennessee and he was back home where we're from, I just started digging into every single thing I could possibly think of for like help and reassurance and just anything. I literally went to the library. I checked out 8 books. I read them like within days. I was looking for all the things. And one of the things that we just spoke about before being on here was the book, Love and Respect, which, really helped me with leaps and bounds as far as how to responsibly communicate how you're
mm,
feeling and taking, accountability. That was a huge eye opener for me. I had no grasp of so many of the topics that they share in there. Really, it created a foundation, I think, for how I consider, marriage to have a starting point in my mind. So it helped me so much. So I definitely have to, give that its credit too. Um,
yeah. And for anybody that doesn't know, for the love and respect model, what it is that women deeply need on a fundamental level unconditional love in a marriage. And what men need in the exact same intensity is unconditional respect. And the book was also very pivotal for me as well. And so when I read in your book how you saw it on the library shelf and you kind of like went past it and you went past it, but something was pinging, like we're talking about. Did you get those little pings? Like something was pinging to pick that book up. But it was very pivotal. I can't say that word today. Pivotal for my relationship as well, because this was such a new concept for me. I guess, in our view, and especially, I was raised by a very feminist mother. We talked about that beforehand. You were as well. And we are just brainwashed with these ideas. And, respecting a man is not one of them. That,
right.
that
That
is
was not
not,
ingrained.
no, I was not modeled that behavior at all. And my parents are still together. They've been together for like a million years. Um, but that was not what was modeled to me. Respect for a man was not in my vocabulary, and so I had to read that book 3 times before I started grasping that that was something I was capable of doing. And I still struggle with it. I still am cultivating it. But to understand how vitally important that is for a man, that a man needs respect like he needs air to breathe, like
Yeah.
that it's that important for him. And I think it would do so much for marriages for women to be able to understand that in the same way we need that unconditional love and support, they need that respect in that same depth.
Absolutely. And that definitely helped a lot. And the more you look for the evidence of that within your marriage, it only becomes more and more apparent to you because it's very hard to even, think that way. But once you become aware of it, it's very easy to see how true that is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But as far as like evolving beyond that, as we were talking before, we mentioned boundaries for a moment. There was a moment where I had reached with my husband where I felt like I had met the very end of my race as far as being able to carry what I was trying to carry completely on my own. I knew that he seemed to have evolved past me, and I was okay with that until I had met the moment where he was ready to, introduce our first son and eventually our second child to this new person in his life. And I had addressed that with him. I was like, listen, you know, this, I can't go any further than this. I can't keep trying to like salvage and, reclaim our marriage on my own, even if it doesn't look that way to you right now beyond this point. That will be too much for me. And I think discovering that boundary was like an energetic shift for sure. And you could go on and on for days about how energy works and stuff like that. But definitely a shift happened inside of me in that moment. And for him as well. I did not know that in that moment. And it was as if like it was a domino effect. I think that's the best, connection I can make to that after that moment. It just seems like all the work, the inner work I had done all that point, healing myself as far as self-love goes. I had my entire life, to be honest, an extremely negative viewpoint of myself. And then it only worsened after, we got into the darker periods early on in our marriage. And then after becoming a mother, yeah, it was just so low. And one of the things that I've come across since then, many years ago, is that you can't expect someone to love you if you can't even love yourself. That's where the work really is inside of yourself. And you have to build
Mm,
up that relationship with yourself. You have to have the best relationship with yourself to have any successful relationship, whether that's your husband, your kids, even as a daughter or a son, who are, from your perspective, you have to have a good relationship with yourself. You have to believe in yourself and learn to love yourself properly to have relationships that will flourish over time.
yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's something I talk about all the time. You have to fill your own cup and give from the overflow. And so many of us as moms and wives and just, women in general we're so depleted. And we just keep pushing and we just keep pushing and we just keep pushing. And, really you can't. Like we have this, belief that somehow martyrism is noble.
Right.
And what we don't realize is it's not just destroying our health. It's not just destroying our own peace and, our bodies and our psyches. But it's also hurting our families. It's also hurting our kids. It's also hurting our marriages. And that is absolutely the first step that I see in reclaiming your relationship is first working on yourself, you know?
Absolutely. And I've had people, after I wrote my book and going through this, I kind of naturally came into coaching where people started seeking me out. And that's how I kind of got into that industry. But a reoccurring question that would come to me and that I noticed as a theme through some of the first few people that I worked with is they would be like, well, how could I have attracted to the relationship and it felt exciting to begin with if I've never necessarily loved myself? And the things that I've pieced together since then is it's new. And a lot of times when something is new, you'll give it your best, not only to that person, but to yourself. You'll take moments to beautify yourself and you'll go out and do fun things. And whether you're trying to or not, you are filling up your own tank. It might be unintentionally, but you absolutely are. And it kind of gets like in this, little bubble where you're doing everything you need for yourself. And all of that is spilling over to your partner in the new relationship. And that's why it feels so grand and so beautiful. And a lot of people feel like it's like this false, thing that only lasts for a period of time. And eventually, you fade out of that, which is true in most cases, but it does not have to be that way if you become intentional about it. And,
Absolutely.
and that's what's so incredible. And you'll even notice, because obviously my husband and I being together for 17 years now, we've seen the ups and downs for a good little while now. And we can attest that as you go through those ups and downs, you start to identify the patterns. You're like, well, just before that season, I really made a point to take care of my health, or I made time for myself to wake up early in the day so I wasn't rush and on the go, or, anything that really feeds your spirit a little bit differently than just the run of the mill, oh, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And just feeling drained all the time, just getting yourself even a little bit has the natural consequence of having positive results in your relationship. So if you look for those patterns, you'll find that too.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the thing is what most people do is they chase that high. It
Yeah.
is a temporary because they don't find it within themselves.
Hmm.
Because it's, you know, it's inspired by this outside source and we attach it to this outside source rather than it being intrinsic and belonging to us and
Yeah.
being part of our wholeness, then we have to attach it to somebody else. Like, oh,
Right.
oh, that spark is gone, but I can find the spark somewhere else, you know. But when we
Right.
find that spark within ourselves and we really fall in love with ourselves, then that is constantly there. That fire never goes out. And it might, like you said, it goes up and down. But really, like, especially I think as women, as like feminine beings, that falling in love process with ourselves, that deep self-love and self-care that we can find within ourselves, like brings out such a beauty and aliveness and radiance in us that
Yeah.
that is what keeps that flame alive for years after years, you know?
Yes, definitely. That is absolutely the magic. And it can absolutely go long term. There does not have to be big dips of ups and downs. It's how consistent you are with that self love. It's the consistency that absolutely matters.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, another direction, I guess, kind of on the other hand of this, that I wanted to go in is the unconditional love that you cultivate for your partner as well. So we have this first piece, and you were talking about how you reached your limit, and that was your boundary. And I experienced, you know, something very similar in my relationship where I had done the growth and I had done the self-love and the exploration and got to a point where it was like I have reached my boundary, you know?
Mhm.
And so I understand that. But then there is also, you know, the cultivation of loving, and it can be even at a distance if the other person cannot grow, but cultivating that unconditional love for the other human being in that dynamic. And you had done a podcast on that I listened to that I really enjoyed, so I'd love to touch on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The boundary most definitely does not stop the spillover of the unconditional love. I had decided even before, choosing my words wisely in that moment. I was like, it doesn't mean I have to stop loving him. I'm going to love him forever, no matter what form that looks like. Because love can evolve. Love doesn't look the same for every relationship. But the thing is unconditional love absolutely does heal people. Most people, if not all people, have a broken past from one thing or another. And when someone is just going to decide, no matter what, that they are going to love someone to the best of their ability, that helps to heal that person. And I absolutely have witnessed that happen with my husband. And, he has confirmed that from his side as well. And frankly, once we graduated beyond that season of life, he's had to really love me unconditionally. And that has really helped me so much, where in hindsight, I can really see that as well. So, like, what's beautiful about unconditional love is you spill it and you spill it and you spill it for as long as you can and you let it pour to that person. But one thing or another happens, whether that's due to like a soul contract or whatever it may be, that it may be in turn to come in reverse at some point. And it definitely has in our relationship. And I am super thankful for it. But yes, the more unconditional you can love someone, that's definitely going to be tied to the success of your relationship, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you just said something that I want to highlight, and it's like then it's the other person's turn because I feel like a lot of people, and I did this and still struggle with this mindset that it's not fair. It's not fair. Like
Mhm.
I just keep loving, I just keep giving, I just keep doing, and it's not fair. But yeah, it does tend to balance back out, and it is a give and a take, and it's like having the radical self responsibility to own your side of it and do what is best in that moment with what you have to work with. Because sometimes some of us are more resourced, and it should be the more resourced partner that does step up and take responsibility.
Absolutely. And as far as what you just mentioned, as far as like the not fair, the correcting of the mindset and doing the internal mental work changes everything, because you literally can't unconditionally love somebody from that mental space. So if someone feels like they're doing their best to love someone unconditionally and they still have that narrative playing in their head, it's not actually unconditional love. It's something else. It's more of a superficial actions. I'm doing. And there's expectation of getting something in reverse. That mindset is absolutely what needs to be fixed. And there are a lot of mechanisms and tools that people have come up with to help with that. I've actually come across this tool that people use that have been labeled like 5 different ways. But essentially, it's your mind, which is thought, your feelings, and then your actions. Those 3 things are so strongly tied together. And a lot of people call it cognitive behavior therapy. There's a lot of labels that come down to these 3 things that are so strongly tied together and how you can work to intentionally manipulate them. But if something like that is going on in your head, doing thought work, whether that's consistent meditation, telling yourself that it's possible to think differently about something. Because sometimes people say like, oh, think positively. And a lot of people feel threatened by that because they feel like it's disingenuous. They feel like it's not natural, like almost like they're gaslighting themselves, which, by the way, I do not enjoy that word right now very much because people overuse it. But in this case, people can think of it that way, like they're trying to convince themselves of something that is not true. But if you tell yourself it's even possible to think or feel differently about a situation, that word possible alone helps open the door mentally so much. It made all the difference for me. So if someone is interested in something like that, you can look up the cognitive behavioral therapy and it'll pop up and share so much more information about that. But there's a lot of work that can be done there as far as self-love and internal work.
Well, and you mentioned something that I also was excited to touch on, which is meditation. And so meditation, breath work, yoga, some of these more somatic therapies, ecstatic dance is one that I've been really big into the last couple of years.
I'm all about the dancing.
Yay! You should join me next time. I go to one in Gainesville very often.
And for those out there who love it and feel like it's not beautiful, it does not matter how it looks. It is all about the feeling inside and how it frees your soul.
Yes, frees your soul. That is definitely. But yeah, you had said now, you bring dance into your day every day as a way to like fill yourself back up. But those practices, I think, have been so pivotal for not just my journey, but I see as like the thing. And it doesn't have to be the one thing. Like I know when I was in my my early stages of my trauma healing, meditation was too much for my nervous system. And yoga was kind of where I started. I needed more action. I needed to move my body because sitting and being still with myself was it was painful. It was not just scary, but it was painful to sit there and be still with myself. But as you, whatever your nervous system can handle, these kind of practices are really just so fundamental and key to starting that journey.
A lot of people think, and it's understandable why people would think this, especially if they don't research or dive into it at all, that meditation has to look a certain way. And usually it's somewhat formal and a repetitive practice that looks exactly the same and super disciplined over and over. And all meditation at its simplest form of description is you're just either fully immersed or focused on one single thing. So really, meditation can be essentially anything. And the way that you know that you're actually doing it is that you can feel it feeding your spirit. You come out of it feeling inspired. You're all of a sudden things start to look a little more rosy that didn't before. That's how you know when you've got yourself into a consistent form of meditation right after you come out of something like that. So I like to say that for people that feel like you were saying, like it felt too much or the idea of meditation is overwhelming, because essentially people are meditating a lot of the time and really have no idea that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I think possibly the doom scrolling is a form of meditation
Yeah.
for most people.
Yeah.
I got into mindfulness, so that was kind of yeah, I guess when I was saying meditation, really, the sit down, be still kind.
But that is
Um,
that's the more
yeah,
formal and well-known meditation. So I get where
yeah.
you were coming from.
The mindfulness practice is what I first delved into. That was by gateway into meditation. But that, you can do walking meditations. But those practices really just that paying attention, that being present and paying attention, bringing that intention, is just, yeah, it's so key. Oh, well, I think we are already about at our hour, which is like crazy. That went by so fast. Oh my
It did
gosh.
go fast.
I know I could yeah, I could definitely delve a lot deeper. So how do we want to wrap this up? Where do we want to leave the audience? I think I would love it if we could leave them with I know we've given so many like nuggets, but a place to start if they are experiencing pain or, you know, hopefully not, as deep and dark as what we both experienced, but in a dark place in their marriage. Like, where would you say to start?
I think to keep it like not too serious, and essentially what I feel like sprouted my inspiration for everything else is I just started taking legitimately only 5 minutes a day to do something for myself that I absolutely loved. And it doesn't have to be something unrealistic, like going on a shopping spree where you spoil yourself. I literally just started dancing for 5 minutes a day to my favorite songs. And that's where it really all started for me as far as inspiration goes, and what led to me diving in and researching more about spirituality and healing my marriage and meditation and all the routes, because it is a rabbit hole. It's all a rabbit hole. And the positive side is just starting with 5 minutes a day with something that you love, and just knowing that you're not alone. Know that you're not
Hmm.
alone. There are always people out there that will be there to love you and support you. You just got to reach out and let someone help and let someone be there. But the 5 minutes a day, even if you're just feeling like a lone soldier, do that for yourself. Start with 5 minutes.
Yes, this is something that I talk about all the time too. There's so much overlap. For me, it was like 30 minutes. I just 30 minutes a day of a bubble bath. I talk about that. Like I've probably mentioned it like every single podcast that I've done. Just locking the door, not letting the kids in the bathroom, and spending 30 minutes in a bubble bath.
Yes, and just gradually increase that time, and then eventually that inspires people to wake up earlier so they can steal away a little more time. Or, sometimes I don't like to encourage staying up late because that a lot of people already do.
Yeah.
But like, just to grasp a little bit of alone time that you feel like you can't have otherwise. But
Yeah.
so much can come from just doing 5 minutes or a little longer of something that you love and enjoy so much.
Yep. Yeah, it starts inside of yourself, and instead of looking at the other person and what you want to change about them and what they're doing wrong and all the ways blah 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 they're not showing up, to flip that script and to turn it around and to use your partner as a sacred mirror, like I was saying, and to take radical responsibility and look at yourself and the ways that you could show up for yourself, you know?
Yeah,
Forget the ways he's
absolutely.
not showing up. How are you not showing up for yourself?
Absolutely. Just, yeah, exactly. Exactly as you're saying. And that little bit of time of you feeding your own tank, that only multiplies as it goes outward. You don't have to start with very much to have a ripple effect in other areas of your life, especially in
Yep.
regards to your relationship.
Yep. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And also on what you're saying about support and people being out there. And it's also, I think, important to normalize for us to have these conversations and to say these hard things out loud, but to normalize this because I feel like most of us being like that, I understand now what marriage actually is,
Yeah.
and it is actually designed to bring out the worst of us so that we can deal with our demons.
Yeah.
So
Overcome that.
exactly, exactly. So when we normalize that, we realize everyone in relationship is going through some level of these kinds of things. So many of us are so good at masking and hiding and keeping the skeletons in the closet. And, again, back to our parents' generation, that was very much normalized. You'd keep all that stuff behind closed doors. And so I think having conversations like this and talking about how, redemption is a thing and, really, really bringing this stuff to the light is so important so that we can normalize it for other women out there that are going through this thinking they're alone, thinking that they're broken, thinking that their marriage is broken. And it's like, well, maybe it's right where it's supposed to be and it's ripe to create all of this, newness, all of this growth.
Absolutely. And just give it a little time to grow, just like a
Yeah.
garden. A little,
Yeah.
give it a little time.
100%.
Thank you so much for having me
Oh,
on
thank
here. I really
you.
appreciate it. This is so much fun for me.
Yeah, me too. I'm so glad you came on. So I would love it before we get off if you would just let everybody know how they can get in touch with you. You do one-on-one coaching. Any other ways to work with you? I know you had mentioned you do something called soul charts, which sounds really cool. So yeah, if you could just give my audience a way to get in touch with you, I'd appreciate that.
Yes. So probably the simplest way for me to share my email is daniellej0914 at gmail.com. I have notification pops up. So if you're sending it to me, I'm going to be seeing it very shortly after that, unless I'm in the middle of something. But yeah, as far as charts or the coaching, I'm kind of diversified person, but I love to discuss essentially any topic, especially if there's anyone struggling out there, with homeschooling and things like that. I'm always happy to help on that subject as well, because that can have an effect on multiple relationships in the household dynamic. Um, but again, thank you so much for having me on here.
Oh, thank you too. I'll link your email in the show notes for anybody that wants to reach out. Awesome.
I appreciate it.